Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden. Welcome to a special Code Q&A stream where we have a special guest. Miško Hevery is the CTO of Builder.io and the creator of Qwik and Angular. So, Miško, if you'd like to give a quick intro of yourself.
Hey, how's it going? Yes, I did this thing called Angular, and I'm doing this thing called Qwik. And yes, I'm a CTO. So you covered all the basic things in here. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. So the way today is going to work is we have ways for you to ask questions. So here, if you go to vox.coding.garden, you'll see all the chat commands that you can do. So in the chat, and we'll have a chance to look at it later. And then also, if you see a question on the site that you like, be sure to upvote it. So exclamation mark upvote followed by the question number, and that will upvote it. And then also, if you have a comment, you can comment on that. Let me fix my camera really quick. There's some blue screen artifacts. Okay. I think we're good. And can everyone hear Miško okay? How are the levels?
Hey, how's it going?
Does it need to go up? Is it good? Sounds good. Awesome. Okay, so I have some questions for you, Miško, first, just to get things started. I'd like to get to know you a little bit more, and for the chat to get to know a bit more as well. And then from there, we'll get into some more like technical questions. So my first question for you. Good. Is do you prefer coffee, tea, or neither?
You know, I drink coffee because it's delicious, but I feel like the coffee is really not that good for you, so I try to avoid it, but I'm not successful at it at all.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm an addict in terms of coffee.
I see. Yeah, so I prefer tea. I had some jasmine green tea this morning. Sometimes I'll drink some yerba mate, but I've never been a coffee drinker, so.
You're a lot more sophisticated than I am, is what it's come down to.
I don't know about that. Okay, my next question is, do you have a morning routine? Do you eat something specific? Do you exercise? Do you check your emails? Do you check Twitter? What does a morning of Miško look like?
Yeah, actually I do. I wake up around 6 o'clock and I stroll over to the gym, which is just my garage, and then I do some exercises for about an hour. I actually either have an app that tells me what to do, or I actually have a kind of a personal trainer that happens remotely through a video conferencing. So twice a week, I have a guy who screams at me remotely through video, and that's pretty much it. That's my morning routine. And then I get up and I have to get the kids off to school, and yeah, that's what happens every morning.
Awesome. I might look into something like that because I definitely need some motivation to exercise. So like a personal trainer, that's awesome. Do you have any hobbies outside of coding?
I do. You know, I somehow managed to get myself pretty deep into 3D printing and 3D model design. And so I design all kinds of things around the house. Drives my wife crazy because, you know, basic things that you could just buy are instead 3D printed in our house. Nice. Things like soap dispensers and, you know, things that you would just have a normal item in your house, like, you know, a toilet dispenser or whatever. Like, it just gets 3D printed.
That's awesome. Do you have a special room for the printer? Because I know those can go all hours of the night and they can get loud, so.
Yeah, actually, they're not that loud.
Okay.
They're relatively quiet. They do print for a long time. It's just in my garage, so okay. It's pretty far away from anybody hearing it. So yeah.
That works out. Okay, I have the age-old question. I don't know if you've heard it or not. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah.
It's a good question. Like, it feels like the answer is no, but like technicality sounds like yes. It's like two buns in the middle. I'm gonna go with yes. I think it's a sandwich. Although, yeah, it's probably not a sandwich.
Well, I'm in the same camp too. Like, if it has bread and stuff, then it's a sandwich. But there are some people that get in some pretty heated debates that it is absolutely not a sandwich. So I don't know.
I guess the bread is not exactly square.
Yeah.
Like if you stuck a hot dog in a square bread, that's pretty clearly a sandwich, right?
Yeah, but I guess it also comes down to how do you define a sandwich? Like, is it the bread type? I mean, I think the fact that there's a fold, you have like hoagies that technically have folded bread, and those are sandwiches. So, I don't know. Yeah, and then
yeah. I'm not gonna lose sleep over this.
Great, that's a good way to be. Do you work standing or sitting, or both?
I actually have a kind of a kneeling chair. Like this is if you can see me rocking back and forth. It's like this rocking kneeling chair.
Okay.
I find this better than actually just a regular chair. But no, I don't stand. That's
Okay.
too much work.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some coding questions. Do you listen to music when you code? And if you do, what kind?
I try to, not always. The key over there is it has to be music that doesn't have words because those are distracting. So I try to find something that's just purely instrumental, and then I'll listen to that. Typically, like standard, modern things, but you have to just find the instrumental version of that.
I see. Yeah, so I do a similar thing. I listen to a lot of, I guess, like chill hop or lo-fi hip hop, and then also some EDM, but some like more ambient EDM as well. But yeah, I can't code with words happening as either.
Yeah, your brain can only do one thing at a time.
For sure. All right, a lightning round of code style questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Tabs
Spaces, not tabs. Is that what? Yes.
That's the first question. Yeah, can you talk why spaces? Really, I guess I said it was gonna be a lightning round, but why spaces?
I think because it's what's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter what the configuration of the person viewing the page is. You know that it's going to be formatted a particular way, right? Like so, it's here's my intention. This is how I want it, and so I'm giving it to you this way. Versus tabs are like, I don't know what you're going to configure the thing, and it's going to look different, whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, I've heard the argument that tabs. So the person, if you choose tabs, the person viewing the code can decide how many tabs they want to view it as. So. Like if I prefer a 2-space tab, I can see the code with 2-space tabs. But if someone else prefers 4, then they can see the same code with a 4-space tab.
Why is this still an argument?
I don't know. but
I mean, most companies you work at, there is coding styles, right?
Right.
And you will just follow the coding style that exists. And I have never worked anywhere where there was tabs. It's always been spaces.
I think that's the main thing. There are so many tools these days that just make a code base consistent and a team consistent, so you can kind of do whatever you want, but as long as you're running prettier or ESLint, then it all works out.
Yes.
Do you prefer semicolons or not in your JavaScript?
Oh yeah, semicolons.
Semicolons.
Don't make me guess. Don't make me guess.
I agree.
Like I am the laziest person you can imagine, and like if you can make it easier without me using my brain power, please do that.
I agree. Double quotes or single quotes on strings?
I really don't care. Whatever the prettifier does. It doesn't matter what I do, actually. The prettifier changes it anyways. And I think the default is single quotes, if I remember correctly. But yeah.
Yeah, I think prettier might default to double, but I always change it to single. Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Whatever it works, go with it.
And then last personal preference question. Do you work on Mac, Windows, Linux, or a combination of them?
Mac. So definitely a Mac person. Been switched over from Windows back in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, and haven't looked back since.
Nice. Okay, let's get on to more serious stuff. Or actually, I have one more like personal question.
Okay.
So I watched an interview that you did with Qwik, and you ended talking about metabolic health. So is this something? is this something that still interests you? And if it is,
it is.
Okay, yes. Can you give us like a elevator pitch or like a quick tip as to why we should care about it, or how someone might get started caring about their metabolic health?
Well, I think the problem is that if you look at us as a population, there's a huge number of people who are either overweight or have diabetes or even cancer. Like it all seems to be related to metabolic health. And so, if you care about having a good life, it should probably be something that should be digging through. But I'm not sure I want to get down that rabbit hole here.
Sure, that's fine. But do you have a quick tip? So like if I want to get interested in it, what's maybe a resource I can look into or something I can change in my personal life to start working on that?
Well, the short is, decrease your carb intake as much as you can. The good book on that is actually, what is it called? The ones that started me that I really enjoyed reading was called The Good Calorie, Bad Calorie.
Okay.
And I really like that book. The front of the page said it has a butter toast, and so there's a picture of a butter and on top of a toast.
Okay.
And it's kind of clever because it's like you're thinking like, oh, which of the two is the bad ones, right? And then by the time you finish reading the book, you're like, oh wait, that's completely backwards.
The toast is bad, the butter is good. I guess that's what it is. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for appeasing me with all those more personal style questions.
Yeah, anytime.
So I have some more technical things for you. So first question is, and I guess with a little bit of preface, the work that you've done on the web has been consistently ahead of its time. I was looking at some of the old conference talks you've given and like articles you published and stuff like that. You were preaching about testing being good for the longest time. In 2010, you made Angular, which fundamentally changed the way most people build web apps. And then I was looking at some other things. Even in like 2016, you were talking about ahead of time compilation in Angular. And these days, Svelte is doing it, Solid is doing it, Vue is looking into doing it with Vapor Mode. So all of these things, you're kind of ahead of other people. Another one I have is in 2018, at your ngconf keynote, you talked about some of the initial ideas of what are now Qwik. So I guess my question for you is being so consistently ahead of the curve, have you learned any lessons along the way of like how to maybe convince people that the ideas you have are good ideas, or how do you get people on the same page of starting to think the way you think or to adopt the ideas that you've come up with?
It's a very open-ended question. First of all, thanks for buttering me up for all those nice things.
Of course.
Not sure I deserve it. But yeah, so convincing people that your ideas are good ideas is actually quite hard. You could pretty much just tell people like exactly what you have in mind. Like I did an ngconf, and nobody takes it. So all those people who think like, oh, you're gonna like tell your secrets and somebody's gonna come along and steal it. I don't know. It hasn't happened to me. Nobody wants to steal my idea. Usually, I have to go on conference talks and convince people for many years that hey, try this. This is an interesting point of view. I don't necessarily think I necessarily have like crazy ideas. I think more I tend to look at what other people are doing and kind of incorporate it into my philosophy. You just kind of stand on the shoulders of giants. You learn from others, etc. And so, if you squint a little bit, you kind of can figure out like what the next steps are. For example, Qwik. The idea behind Qwik is Google internally has a project called Wiz. Wiz is a framework for server-side rendering and client-side kind of updates. And Wiz has many of the similar ideas behind it. And so I was inspired actually by Wiz to be like, hey, can we like not execute JavaScript on a client? And how far can we take this idea? And how Qwik is very different from Wiz, but like the beginnings, you can definitely see similarities in there.
Definitely. Okay, so let's talk about Qwik since you brought it up. So first of all, can you give us a quick intro of what Qwik is and what is the fundamental problem that Qwik is trying to solve?
So Qwik is a framework like other frameworks, React, Svelte, Vue, whatever your favorite framework, Angular, put it in that list. That's basically what Qwik is as well. So it solves the same set of problems that other frameworks solve, but it solves it in a very specific and unique way. And that is that the insight that I had, or rather that is kind of built into the Qwik, or the philosophy of Qwik, is that the startup performance of the page is proportional to the amount of JavaScript that you have to execute on boot, right? And boot is really the hydration part. So what Qwik tries to do really hard is to delay execution of JavaScript as much as possible. And so the way Qwik is designed, architected, the philosophy behind it, everything that we have done really goes towards one goal, and that is, how do we delay execute JavaScript? Because the more JavaScript you have to execute on startup, the more JavaScript you have to download, the slower the startup performance, the slower your network is, the longer it's going to take, the older the device you happen to have, the longer it's going to take. And so Qwik is just basically has a one specific goal, and that is, how do we decrease this, right? There are people who are running around and basically say, oh, too much JavaScript, we should just write less JavaScript. And I don't think that's a reasonable thing, to write less JavaScript. Like, we're just going to keep writing more and more. Like, this isn't going to stop. And so instead, Qwik, what's trying to do is not necessarily to say, write less JavaScript. Instead, Qwik is all about, how do we make sure that you can write as much JavaScript as you want, but we don't overwhelm the browser at the very, very beginning. We do it, incrementally, right? So if you think about a page, like let's say you go to an Amazon website, right? The initial page you have is purely static. It's just HTML. There's nothing in there behind it. And so why do you need to have any sort of JavaScript until you start interacting with the page? Until I still click on a product or click on a buy button or any action as a user that I take, why do I have to execute huge amounts of JavaScript, right? And that's the world we currently are, is that the existing frameworks, because of hydration, because of how they're built, require you to eagerly execute this huge amounts of JavaScript so that they can set up listeners, recover the state of the application, and so on and so forth. And so this is kind of the difference that Qwik tries to solve is, how do I give the same developer experience to the developer so they can build a website just like they built before, but how do we not overwhelm the browser with JavaScript?
For sure. And yeah, I guess like, is Qwik really one of the first things to think of this idea where basically you're not shipping everything all at once? Because I guess what we're used to, I guess if you compare this to something like Next.js with, I guess like server-side rendering, where initial page render is hydrated and then loads basically all the JavaScript required for the entire page, for the entire application. But I guess what you're saying with Qwik, instead, you only load the things that are needed. So if a button is clicked on, you only get that JavaScript. If you hover over something that requires interactivity, you only get that JavaScript. So is Qwik one of the first to do something like this?
So, as I said, Qwik was inspired by Wiz.
Oh, Wiz,
and
okay.
Wiz is in Google, and Wiz definitely does many of these tricks. But like, I would argue that, Wiz was done like 10 years ago. And so, it's showing its age because of what existed back then. And so Qwik has advantages that Wiz doesn't have. And so it has a much better developer experience. But fundamental ideas behind it are kind of the same. And, there's just been a general trend of decreasing the amount of JavaScript we have to run at the beginning, whether it's React server components, whether it's island architecture, or delaying the hydration, or doing hydration progressively as the page loads. All of those are basically different strategies to kind of improve it. Qwik just takes it to an absolute extreme and says, how do we just architect the system such that we don't have to execute anything? So if you look at React Server components, for example, they are trying to improve the situation by saying, like, many of these components are server-side rendered, and the interactive bits are the client-side rendered only. But even for the interactive bits, you still have to run hydration. So the amount of hydration you're running is definitely decreased with the React Server components, right? So that's a plus. That's the window they're getting. But you still have to do hydration. The place where kind of Qwik shines is that, as bizarre as it sounds, we can basically execute the equivalent of add event listener, setting up the listener on a server. We can serialize all the state of the system. And then in the client, we don't have to do anything. So when the page first gets rendered, there is essentially close to zero JavaScript that has to execute in Qwik. And it's only when you start interacting with the page do we bring in the specific thing that you need. So if you click on a buy button, then we bring in the buy button in the shopping cart, right? There's no need to bring, I don't know, the menu system or the comment section, right? That's the user is not interacting with that. So why spend time getting that? And so that's kind of the idea behind Qwik.
Awesome. So, I mean, I guess I can guess based on what you've said about Qwik and what it can do, but are there any specific kinds of websites that would benefit from Qwik, or do you think most websites would benefit from using something like Qwik?
I think most websites would benefit from something like Qwik, but let's kind of focus on the ones that do. So first of all, just to make it clear, Qwik is really the same category as React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, et cetera, right? So there is whatever is a good thing for those technologies is a good thing for Qwik.
Okay.
Right. But a place where Qwik will really, really shine are sites where that you have to navigate to, and your application is huge. So if you have a large dashboard or a really, really complicated website, which has a huge amount of JavaScript behind here, this is an area where Qwik is going to do a really good job of breaking things into pieces and then figuring out what are the pieces that are required and which are not, and then just delay execution of the code as much as possible. So So things that, like, for example, let's say you're sending a link to your, you have a company. First of all, e-commerce is a perfect example of this, right? Where you want people to navigate to a page and click on a buy button, etc. But within e-commerce, within a company as well, let's say you have a coworker and you want to send them a bug or an issue or a customer relationship record or something of that sort, right? Any place where you're sharing links with others, it matters, because like, how many times have people shared a link with you and you're about to click on it and you go like, do I really want to spend the next 5 seconds of my life waiting to see what's about to happen on the other side?
Right.
And you know what I'm talking about, right? Like that 5 seconds is like, it's enough friction where you're like, no, maybe not.
Right. And yeah, I think like there's been some metrics going around just in terms of like conversions and companies trying to get new customers and sales, like just taking half a second longer can basically turn a customer away from your website. So
yes, I think we're all kind of in a stalemate, in a sense that we all know that a faster website is better, but nobody knows how to make it faster. And so as a result, like, we're in kind of a, we all know our website sucks, and so we just like commiserate with everybody else. Like, yeah, we suck, but like, so do you, so it's okay. We're in the same company.
Yeah.
There's not much we can do here,
Definitely. But I think that that's a good segue to the talk that you're going to be giving at JSNation. So quick aside, this interview is sponsored by JSNation. So if you haven't heard of it, jsnation.com. It's the main JS conference in 2023. Miško will be giving a talk there, as well as many other people in the JavaScript community. And I'll also be there. I'll be an MC at the conference as well. But the talk you're giving is called Building a Web App, the Easy Path and the Performant Path. Why are they not the same? I think that leads exactly into the thing you were just talking about. Can you give a quick summary of what you're going to be talking about at the conference?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that when you build an application, right, oftentimes you have choices to make in terms of like what's easy and what's like what actually would perform better. And so a lot of times as developers, what we do is we take shortcuts, right? Like we just want to up and make the application work and then move on with our life, right? And so we tend to do whatever is easiest at the moment. And the interesting thing is that like if you build your application this way, you oftentimes become less performant. And so one of the things we've done is we looked at all of the movies applications. So it's like this demo website where the movies is built with every single framework, and we compared them. And we published this. And the moments we did that, like everybody came out and basically said, yeah, but the movie app that you have built using whatever technology happens to be here is not the most performant way of doing it. The person building it, could have made other choices, and then this app would have been faster. And to me, like, that's kind of the point, which is like, yeah, but why isn't the easy one? Why isn't the obvious thing to do and the easy thing to do the same thing as the performant thing to do, right? Those are two separate things. And so oftentimes when the application becomes slow, the experts kind of come out of the woodwork and they say like, yeah, but you should have done this and you should have done that and you should have whatever, right? Well, why wasn't those things the defaults, or why weren't those things the obvious things to do or the easy things to do? And so one of the things we kind of make sure that we do in Qwik is that the two are the same. If you just do the most obvious thing and the easiest thing in Qwik, you'll end up with a performant application. And the reason for that is because we made sure that we can break up the application into pieces. We make sure that we can serialize the application, make sure we can resume the application. We make sure of all of these things. We can, for example, prefetch code so that even if you are in a slow network or in a tunnel or the connectivity drops out, the application still works. We create the correct bundles, the bundle sizes, the chunking, etc. We basically take care of all of those things that are kind of required so that you can just focus on the application and you don't have to think about any other pieces.
Awesome. So I guess I have a quick anecdote that I think is similar. So I was using AngularJS back in 2012. And when I discovered it, I loved it. I became an expert in it. So when people started to complain about, oh, well, Angular is slow or like it's not doing what I want it to do, I mean, my answer was, well, you're doing it wrong. Like I've learned about the digest loop and I learned about like one-time watchers and stuff like that. But I think the kind of the argument you're making is it's kind of hard to be in that camp of, well, you're just doing it wrong. You need to do it this way. And if the framework can basically do that for you, then you kind of have like the best of all worlds.
Yes, that's basically the point. And we should be essentially setting up the developers for success, right? And I think most frameworks do not. In most frameworks, you have to be kind of an expert, right, to get the most out of the framework.
Awesome. I think we're ready to get into some questions that the chat has. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So if you have a question, type !ask in the chat. It'll show up on this website, vox.coding.garden. And we'll go with the first one from Avi, who just says, how did you come up with Qwik? I think we've kind of touched on it if you want to give like a quick version.
Yeah. So the quick version is Google has this thing called Wiz. Wiz is a framework for downloading JavaScript to your browser and executing things, and also server-side pre-rendering. It is what powers search and Google Photos. And if you noticed, those two products are amazingly fast, right? They respond fast, you can interact with them fast, etc. The basic idea behind Wiz is basically don't rebuild, don't hydrate, just continue execution kind of where the server left off. I wouldn't say Wiz is the same thing as resumability. You know, again, historically it's a little bit different, but I think it sets up the right kind of mental model, which is that, hey, let's focus on not overloading the browser. That's kind of the basic philosophy of Wiz. It's like, don't overload the browser with too much JavaScript. And so if you just have that kind of a point of view, then kind of Qwik is the natural outcome of kind of thinking about it that way. So that's how Qwik came about.
Awesome. Thanks for the answer. And then Avi also asked, what companies are using Qwik? Is there a section on the Qwik website that'll show you?
There is all the way at the top. I think all the way at the top, if you scroll to the top, there's the I forget the
Showcase
text. Showcase, yes.
Cool. Awesome. Do you know of any companies you can name off that are using Qwik?
Yeah, so the biggest one I know of is Rose BE Belgium, and they do it for if you want to schedule an appointment with your doctor, then you can come to a Rose BE website and you can basically choose a doctor and timing, etc. And they do scheduling. I forget the numbers, but they have quite a lot of traffic, or they own like a significant portion of the bookings that exist for making your booking with the doctor. Funny enough, they were actually a Angular application, and they came to us specifically because, like, you know, one of the things that's important to us is people discover us through like a search engine and SEO, etc. And all of those things are kind of hard to do in Angular, you know, and so they started looking at Qwik as a way to kind of solve the specific problem. So they're one of the biggest customers right now. They absolutely love it, and I think they're going to be talking in a few conferences about their experience with it.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Yeah, so Noctate also touched on something that I talked about, but I think the one piece I didn't ask was, is there a situation where you wouldn't use Qwik? Because I think your answer for when to use it is pretty much anywhere you would use any other front-end framework. But
yeah, so if you can ask the same question of existing frameworks, when wouldn't you use an existing framework, right? I think the same things would kind of apply to Qwik as well. If I'm building a game, I probably won't use Qwik, right? I mean, that's not what games are for. If I have to do other things that existing frameworks are not necessarily the best suited for, perhaps you don't do that either. One place that I can kind of do a shout out for is, for example, Astro. Like Astro focuses heavily on static blog kind of websites, right? You can do those in Qwik as well. But I mean, Astro, because it specializes in it, will probably be slightly better in terms of, not in terms of the performance, but in terms of the DX, because like that's kind of the specialty.
Right.
Right. But other than that, like it's a general purpose framework. So whatever existing frameworks solve or can be used for, Qwik can be used for as well.
Awesome. Slightly off topic, Beganovich asks, do you have any connections to the Balkans region? Your name is very Balkanish.
No. So, okay, let's talk about my name.
Yeah.
I'm from Slovakia. I was born in Slovakia. And, when I came to the US, I just picked a American name. It was kind of boring. But then I had a girlfriend and she was like, well, why does your parents call you Miško? So I explained, like it's a kind of a friendly way to call your child or whatever, right? And so then she started calling me Miško, and then all my friends were like, so why is your girlfriend calling you Miško? So I was like, well, it's and I explained that, right? And so then my friends started calling me Miško, and so at some point I was moving to Phoenix, and I said, let's as an experiment just introduce myself as Miško. And so I just did, and it stuck.
That's awesome.
So it is not my legal name.
Okay.
My legal name I'm not going to share.
Sure, that's
just to kind of be interesting.
Yeah, that's totally fine. So I know you're from Czechoslovakia, which is now Czech Republic, and so I translated Miško and it said bear. the English translation is bear.
That's a mistranslation.
Okay.
So in Russia, I believe in Russian language, Miško is a bear.
I see.
I don't know why Google Translate has an error or something.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
Wait,
not a bear.
Are you saying it's more like a term of endearment for a child or something like that?
It's a term of endearment for Joseph Joe.
Oh, okay.
So
Awesome.
Miško is the short version of it.
Awesome. Thanks for exploring that question with us.
Sure.
If you've asked a question, type exclamation mark here. It'll bubble up. So if you asked a question like 30 minutes ago and it turns gray, just to make sure that we're only answering questions for people that are here. So in the chat, do exclamation mark here just to make sure that we see the latest questions. Yeah, we can go ahead and ask this one from Pranyan, who says, how doesn't Qwik improve the developer experience compared to newer frameworks like Svelte and Solid? And I think this might be a good time for a code sample. Like if you can maybe point to some things that Qwik is doing that adds to better DX.
Yeah, why don't we do a very quick sample? Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to create a new route. Let's see, new file. Let's make a. Okay, so let's start with a completely blank page. And so this is kind of what you're going to see is going to be very similar. So let's see, default component, the queue autopilot, return div hello world. Okay, perfect. And if I did this right, what did I put it under? Test. I do /test. I should see it. Is the font a good size?
Can you zoom in your editor just a little bit and the browser just a little bit?
Okay, let's.
Yeah, looks good.
And I can zoom in editor. Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
So this is kind of a standard meta framework. I think where the kind of innovation is happening right now is within meta frameworks. So what you're going to see is mostly meta frameworks. So one of the things you need to do is you need to load data. So let's assume that we're loading data on a server, right? And so let's do export use my data route loader. And so most meta frameworks have something like this. And so here I'm gonna pretend that I'm gonna return some data. So sure, like that, export const. So most meta frameworks will have some way of loading the data on a server. And so then what you can do on a client, I'm just going to do something super simple, JSON without stringify. And I want to refer to the data, so my data. Okay, so how do I get a hold of it? So let's see, const my data. Oops, and I mistyped it. Let me see, did that work? Okay, perfect. So I was able to kind of send the data across. Oops, my data.value. Here we go. So here's our list that we have kind of serialized across. And most meta frameworks have some mechanism for doing this, right? So that's not kind of interesting. What is interesting is the way, for example, most things solve it is through something I called a disappearing export. So most systems, like for example, Next.js, will have something like export const, what is it called? Get static props.
Or get server-side props. Yeah.
Or server-side props or something, right? Yeah. Server-side props. Anyways, the exact syntax is not important. So let's just return something here just so it's happy. And the reason why this works is because nobody imports this particular bit. And because nobody imports this bit, the tree shaker can remove it. But that creates a problem because if I accidentally use it, I'm not allowed to do this, right? If I did this, it would be a problem, right? So instead, I need to get the data, and usually the data gets passed in here like props. And now I have to match the type that's here. So let's say the type here, the thing that return here is first name. Okay, so now let's say I want to match the type here. Oops, what happened to my mouse? Oh, really? My trackpad stops working right as I talk. All right, let's see.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, so the way you refer to it is you got to do something like, first of all, you can type in any, right? But that's wrong in the sense that like you messed up. You can do the wrong information. You could just say something like this. oh yes, it's just complaining it's never used. And that's going to be allowed, it's going to let you do this, but it's kind of wrong. Or you can do return type of gets server. That server, why is this not working? Something like this, right? Yeah, it's just complaining about so it doesn't complain.
Is it like type of? Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you see, like it's not connected. And then let's say you wanted to do, well, let's say you have more than one server props, one that gets the current user, another one that gets the current item or something like that. You can't really do that. You have to kind of do everything in here. And so these are the kind of problems that existing systems don't really solve. And so the way this is solved in Qwik is, first of all, I could have as many of these as I wanted to. I can say my data 2, and then I can just get a hold of my data 2 here, right? I can grab as many as I wanted. Okay, it's complaining that I don't have it. Using it. And so you can have multiple imports in this particular location. So you can see like, oh, give me whether or not user is logged in, give me the current product I'm looking for, etc. But more importantly, notice I didn't have to do any kind of shenanigans with the type system, right? Like over here. It just directly is tied into it. And so because it's direct reference, this to this, there has to be a way to break this apart when you create bundles, because otherwise your client will end up with server code. And that's problematic for many reasons, right? You don't want to send server code to the client. I mean, first of all, it's bytes that you don't need. Second, if you execute it, it will blow up. Third, like it could have like private keys or something. Like none of that stuff you want to do. And so you need a way to extract this code and realize this code right here is a server-side code that I should never ever send to the client. And so the magic of Qwik, a part of the thing we talk about is code extraction, are these dollar signs. And these dollar signs basically allow you to break up your application in pieces and allow for lazy execution and or lazy loading. And so in this particular case, the client can refer to the parent without having to worry about accidentally actually bringing all the code base with it. And because we can have that reference directly, we don't have to worry about type inference, right? The types correctly flow to the children and so on and so forth. And so it's many things like that. The other thing to kind of point out is, in this particular case, if we look at what's happening, let's just kind of look at it how it's different. If I go to the network tab, let me make the font even bigger. And I'm going to focus on JavaScript, and I'm going to refresh. And so the only code that I get here is, let's see, I'm going to remove Vite because Vite doesn't count. What is it eagerly executing? What is this? Sorry, I think this is a debug thing that doesn't exist in browser. I'm actually not sure what meant that this got added. It seems like it's running use on document. What?
Is it the Git server side props doing something weird, or I don't know.
No, I think this has to do with the window location history and stuff, but I don't know. Okay, this is, I'll have to research this. This is an embarrassment.
No worries, sorry.
The point is, besides this code right here, no other code showed up, right? So let me just clean this up a little bit. Let's delete some stuff here. So none of the code kind of shows up except for what is actually needed. So in this particular case, the system kind of looked at it and says, you don't need any JavaScript. So let's force the system to have some JavaScript, right? So let's say we want to have a filter, use signal. Its initial filter is nothing. And what we're going to do here is actually, let's turn this into UL. And my data.value dot for each map from UL. This is going to be data. It's just the
think inside the map should be a li. It'll still work, but
oh yeah, li, yes. Thank you. Okay, so now we want to filter this, right? So you would do standard filter, and you would say data, and so you say data dot contains. What is it? It's just the index. Oh, filter dot value, and if this is not equal to -1. Okay, so we added a whole bunch of code, but there's no way for us to change the filter, right? The filter is still, we'll be reading the filter, but nobody's changing it. Right. And so again, the system's like, yeah, no interactivity. I'm not sending any code over. So let's make it so that we can add interactivity. So.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just comment on while you're doing this. If you've ever written React, all of this will look very similar. But yes, I think like what you can get into after we get the functionality and everything is like ultimately how the loading of the JavaScript is different, how the rendering is different, and I think it goes back to the idea of like the framework doing the right thing. So the developer can just like write the code that you're used to and what makes sense, but
okay, let's see. Moment of truth.
Okay.
What did I mess up? Cannot read properties of undefined filter. What?
Do you have to do
filter?
My data dot value is undefined.
Cannot read properties of undefined reading filter. Where am I reading filter? Dot filter. Oh. No, my data, there's a list.
Is there anything special you have to do to call the use my data function, or is it just as it is defined?
No, it's just like that. What am I doing wrong here? Is it right? So what do we here? Just comment this out for a second. Oh, wait, is it?
Oh, I think that makes no sense. Well, I think for the index, instead of doing index of, you could maybe do contains or includes. I forget which one it is. Maybe it's includes. Yeah, and then you can just get rid of the not equal to -1. But I guess so. The error that popped up there is basically like on initial render data.value is potentially undefined.
Wait, something else is going. First of all, I shouldn't have to do this question mark. That's wrong.
Okay.
Like it works here, right? The data is defined. Filter, and this should correctly know that it's a string, which it knows it's a string, right? Notice how there's a string. This thing is an array of strings. This thing becomes a signal of string. Therefore, this is a string array, and the filter now knows it's a string, right? Under no point have I declared anything, and the information just flows.
Right.
I am really puzzled as to why, when I type, it is not able to read the filter.
Are you on like a test build of Qwik City or something like that? I don't know.
Did I do something weird on my computer? No, this is standard stuff.
Yeah, I guess what's weird is like initial page render shows it fine, but the moment you start trying to filter, the error pops up. So
I'm wondering if it's something with my computer. Let's just make one here.
Cool, that's fine.
Because I know this one works. s/index.tsx. Paste, and then I'm going to make the font bigger. What? Clearly I'm doing something dumb. What am I doing dumb? Route loader. It's going to be something completely obvious, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see anything. There's a suggestion in the chat to rename the filter variable, but that shouldn't do anything. I mean, because like how like that was conflicting with the array filter, but yeah, it shouldn't. I will say that chat is on your side right now. They're like, I'm glad that Miško is human. I'm glad that he makes errors too.
You're not reading undefined filter. What are you talking about? So it's complaining about this thing.
Do you have to do something special in the route loader to return an array? Like the fact that it's an array signal?
You know, that actually might be it. No.
Reading data. Yeah.
Data. Because it originally renders, right?
That's the weird part to me is like the fact that you can see the original render, but the moment you start trying to filter is when the error pops up.
Okay, I am.
Well, maybe we found a new bug to report. I don't know. I guess you've done this demo before, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've done this tons of times. It could be a bug.
okay.
But like, what? Okay. I don't know why it doesn't work. But the thing to show, let's go back to the network tab. The thing to show is, let's see, are we network tab? Let's refresh. The thing to show is no JavaScript except the one that is there. And then when I start interacting with it, the rest of the JavaScript shows up. And the thing to kind of understand is that this isn't the whole world. Like if you look at this thing, it literally just downloaded just this portion right here, right? Because that's the bit that it needed. So then after it downloaded that, it had to download the framework. Then what is this? This is what it, okay, so this is the support system for it. At some point, it downloads the JSX associated with it, right? So that's the component right here. This component right here, that's the component that downloads. And a few other things. I think this is the Qwik City router. What didn't download is, for example, if you go to the layout, if you look at this page, right, there's this header and the footer. That header and footer is inside of layout TSX right here. And so, for example, this header, which is a separate component that has Qwik logo and a bunch of other things, that component never downloaded to the client. And so it's very intelligent in a sense that like it recognizes that this component is static. It never changes. Also, the footer is static. It never changes, right? And so it downloads things only when necessary. And so for a small application, it's kind of hard to show it off. But as the application gets larger and larger, imagine that you are trying to add a item to a shopping cart. Well, the thing that you need is the code that adds an item to the shopping cart and also the code that reruns the shopping cart. What you don't need is the menu system or the comment section or any of the other things that are probably on the page right now. And so you can do these kinds of tricks in there as well.
Definitely. I think one thing I'll point out that's really cool, I didn't know Qwik did this, is the localized error message. Like you have an emoji pointing to where the error happened. I guess if there were an error like in a nested component, would that happen as well?
Yeah, so it's even more interesting. If I hit the Alt key, if I hit the Alt key, you see how everything becomes clickable? This is a div only thing.
Okay.
So like, for example, I want to know, where is this thing defined? Made with love by builders. So if I click on this, then it takes me to the source code associated with it. And I can go and change it, save it, come back, and I see now I have exclamation points. So it's kind of we care about the developer experience, that you have a good one. And so I apologize why this thing is not working.
No
It's
worries.
really confusing to me. So let me do something slightly different. Let's just
Okay.
leave the signal away for a second. Let's do a count. Let's do a count, and let's do a button. And let's say on click, count value, click me, and then here, what are we going to print here is the count value. Okay, so now we have a button here that I can click. And I can go and click on this button and, let's see. We have this surprise component, which I'm not sure why it's showing up. Here is the listener, right? This is the click listener associated with it. Notice that the only thing we downloaded is the actual count value plus plus. We downloaded the framework itself, and this is probably some development related to things that gets downloaded, right? So really, the only thing that downloads is the code over here. What's interesting is that we didn't actually even download the JSX associated with this particular component, because the whole system was actually serialized in here. Let's see, if you look at the JSON, this in here, so let's makes it easier. Let's start with a different count. Let's start with 1, 2, 3. Oops. So let's start with 1, 2, 3. If you look at this JSON, so somewhere in here, there's going to be 1, 2, 3 right here. And you can see that this is how the system knows that the current count is 1, 2, 3. Now, if we go further, what we're going to see is a bunch of subscriptions. And one of these subscriptions will point us to an object, which is, let's see, number 6 or 8. I forget which one it is. Button ID 7. Okay, so the 7th object has the, here we go, is 8 over here, is 1, 2, 3, right? So if you look over here, what this basically says, that if a object number 6 changes, go find a ID, a DOM element with 8 and go update its data with the next value. And so this allows us to update the DOM without the component code even being present, right? So let's just say console.log render, let's just print render here, right? You can see that it prints on a server, right? The code executes on a server. I can click on the count over here. Nothing is printing over here. This code never runs on the client, right? This is a server-only thing. And I can go and increment, and yet it's not even executing on the client. So it's kind of a strange world where your application, the Qwik figures out which bits are needed and which are not, and then only sends the relevant bits. And then the beautiful part is that as a developer, you don't have to think about it, right? Like, we were just building our component without really doing anything special, and we just naturally ended up in this particular world.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think the part that really hit home for me is the fact that you have a console log in the render, but you're not seeing that on the client side. Because like with React, you would like if anything else updated, that component would re-render and you'd see it logged there. So it's really I think a really good demo of showing just exactly what or one of the things Qwik is doing to really optimize this component, even though it looks like for the most part like a regular React component.
So let's actually do another trick. Is let's put new date to date string. Sure, is that the right one? That's not what I want. What's the current time? To time string?
Yeah, time string will be the time. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So now, obviously, this is not updating, right? Like every time I refresh, it updates because it does a round trip on a server, but it's not updating on a client. So let's say we want to make this update on a client, right? So let's create a time, and let's say const time use signal, and let's just print loading, and then time dot values, right? So obviously just going to say loading, nothing actually works. So now we want to do this on the client. And so you say use browser, use visible task area. So this is kind of similar to use effect. And let's see, is this going to do the right thing? Wow. Okay, autopilot, you're amazing.
Yeah, go Copilot.
Okay, so now it's correctly updating your time every second, right? No, wait, why is it not updating anymore? 2:01. What's going on? Oh, because it said timeout. Ah, autopilot, you got me.
Set interval, yeah.
All right, here we go. Now
Nice.
it's updating
Nice.
the information, right? And so if you go to the network tab, what you're going to see is that, well, obviously, this piece of code associated with the current time, that has to download eagerly, right? Because like, well, I mean, otherwise this can't work, right? And so the framework kind of figures this out automatically. It's like, oh, normally I don't download the code, but in this particular case, I have to download the code. So let me just download the code for you. So now let me show you something that I think is is mind blowing. So let me just put a div over here and say style, and I'm going to say what I'm going to say. It's going to say width, no height, not width, height, 200 pixels. Oh, not enough. Let's put 500 pixels. Okay, so now the clock is off the page, right? It's not available. And so notice there's nothing in the JavaScript, like it didn't download the code yet. Yeah. But then if I scroll the clock into the view, the code shows up just in time to show me the relevant pieces of information.
Fascinating.
And so the reason why this works this way is because when you have a normal systems have hydration. And because they have hydration, the question of like, well, when do you execute? This is essentially equivalent to use effect. When exactly do you execute this, right? And the answer is very simple. Well, you execute it during hydration, right? It's obvious. Where else would you do it? But with Qwik, the answer is not that obvious because, well, there is no hydration. So when exactly would you like to execute this? And so the default behavior of this particular thing is to say, actually, you execute this when it becomes visible. You can override it and you can do it different times. But visibility is kind of the default behavior here. And so we're basically saying, look, there's no point in running this code until you're visible. And so you get this kind of behavior out of the box without even kind of trying. And this is kind of what I like about the system is that, you know, as a developer, we didn't have to think about it. We didn't have to design it in any particular way. We just did the natural thing. And yet the system automatically broke up our source code into lots of small lazy loadable chunks, lazy executable chunks. It figured out how to delay things that are not currently visible, and basically did all of the optimizations that you could think of, you know, without any sort of effort on the point of the on the developer's part, right?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that more than it demonstrates just the developer experience here. Like you literally just put it out of the view and Qwik instantly knew what to do. It knew to not load it eagerly. It lazy loaded it. So we're at our time commitment. Do you have a few more minutes to keep answering questions?
Is it includes or filter? Yes, I have a few more time.
Okay.
I'm just really like,
why isn't that working?
Why isn't this working?
It should be filter and then map.
No, it's a filter. You're right. It's a filter and then a map. Okay, I will have to dig into it. This is going to be a sleepless night. Okay, but yes, I am happy to answer other questions.
Sounds good. And I will say, like, the stuff that worked was fantastic. I think we got quite a few awesome reactions in the chat, just showing how smart Qwik is. Like, just how it figures out the right thing to do. Okay, so if you asked a question, type exclamation mark here. It'll bubble up. Is it cool if we go till about for like 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I'm fine. I don't have anything after this.
Okay, sounds good.
Chit chat for as long as you're willing to have me on your stream.
Yeah, I mean, I got all day, so. All right, so this question comes from Slims. According to your experience, what are the things that you will recommend for mid-level or senior developers to focus on facing the hundreds of tools, frameworks, and technologies? I mean, I guess this pops up because we're talking about a new framework. Like in the world of JavaScript, there's like JavaScript fatigue. So do you have any advice on what to focus on? But yeah.
It's interesting that people talk about JavaScript fatigue, right? But like nobody's talking about like your next Android or Apple fatigue.
Yeah.
Like everybody like happily goes and gets the next device because it's better than the previous one, right?
Yeah.
And so I find that really fascinating that like people are like, we don't want a new framework. We're happy with the one we have. It's like, yes, but like the reason new one is being created is because it can do certain things that your old one cannot. Right. And so presumably there is some benefit to be had over there. Having said that, though, I will point out that I think there has been a bit of a, I would say, stagnation in the sense that there are lots of frameworks available out there. I think, so let me go back further. I think AngularJS was kind of I mean, to tout my own horn, I think it was pretty innovative in a sense that it was new at the time when nothing similar existed. And then React came in, and I think React also brought in lots of new ideas. Like React, in my opinion, were genuinely some super interesting, clever bits that they introduced into their system as well. And so I kind of see that as innovation as well. But then there was lots of other frameworks where I felt like there's essentially just rehashing the same ideas with a better DX, right? So you could certainly say like, hey, JSX has shortcomings, and it's kind of nice. For example, Svelte has a much nicer language for expressing yourself inside of their Svelte thing, right? But at the end of the day, fundamentally, it's just better DX. It doesn't really change anything. And I kind of noticed that there's been, I would say, like a lot of frameworks that kind of went down the route of let's just introduce better DX. And like DX is important, like don't get me wrong, like it's an important thing that people care for about, but I haven't seen like really anything fundamentally new. And so I think Qwik actually brings in something that's fundamentally new, which is this idea of resumability. Like it is a different way of looking at the problems so that we are actually solving something fundamental. Because if you look at existing frameworks, like they all have hydration, they all work in this particular way. The DX is different, the syntax is different, but the way they work underneath it, it's kind of the same.
Right.
And so I'm kind of hoping that, this is kind of, in my opinion, a big enough step where people can like look at it and be like, this is worth the trouble of learning a new thing, because I'm getting something in return that isn't small. Not that DX is small, but it's not what's essentially an improvement just to me, but rather I'm getting something that's an improvement for my users, right? I am choosing one framework over the other. If the choice is over DX, then it's about me. Right. If the choice is about UX, then it's about my users, right? And so I think this is an example where we're actually making a choice that is good for me, because I showed you a DX that's really nice, but also it's good for the user as well, because it does things out of the box that you don't have to think about, right? And normally you could do these things in other frameworks, in quotes, but like it would be super hard, and vast majority of people just won't do it.
Right. Yeah, and I guess if I could touch on that, just in terms of like what do I focus on? Like I use what works. Like I mean, I actually was like really late to adopt like the hybrid rendering and server-side rendering. I was building just like completely static view and React apps with a backend API, just because that worked for me, and the apps I was building wouldn't necessarily have benefited from like server-side rendering or something like that. So like my answer to it is like use what works. Don't let all of the frameworks and everything else like bog you down or give you like decision analysis paralysis. But I think like what Miško is saying, when something comes along that is like fundamentally better and providing something that you didn't have before, then I think it's worth looking into. And I guess looking at Qwik as well, like I think one of the nice things it does is it's very approachable for someone who has done React before, because it looks the same, but you're basically getting you're getting developer experience and you're getting user experience out of it, which I think is a plus.
Right. And the other thing I forgot to mention is out of the box, you also get SEO. A lot of times you build a system and then like, I got to figure out the SEO answer here, right? And Qwik just out of the box will have SEO without even you thinking about it, right? And so like all of these things put together, I think it just builds a whole new level. Like, did you do SEO in other frameworks? Absolutely, right? But is it like just out of the box without even thinking or even trying? It's a different story.
Definitely. Just real quick, shout out to B Holmes, who gave us a raid, brought some viewers over. Appreciate that, B Holmes. Let me give you a shout out. And what were you working on? They were last working on React server components. That's awesome. Yeah, so thanks for bringing your friends over. All right, this question comes from Avi. What is the most complex project you worked on, both solo and on a team?
Yeah, so I think it would probably have to be Angular. Like that certainly was a pretty big thing. I mean, while at Google, I didn't directly work on projects, but I supported through Angular. We would support other things. So for example, Google Console is all written in Angular. So while I had nothing to do with Google Console, oftentimes I got pulled in helping them build things. So Google Console is humongous. It's millions of lines of code, thousands of developers working on it, et cetera. But the projects I actually fundamentally worked on were both AngularJS, now in Builder.io, our builder platform, and of course, Qwik.
Awesome. Yeah, Ben said Ben was working on React server components. Miško, no comment. I guess can you talk a little bit about this gets into the more like technical details of like resumability and the idea of not having to like rehydrate the entire app, like which is what. And I guess I will say I'm fuzzy on the details of server components versus like the old way that Next.js was doing things, right? Because the old way was it would literally have to ship the entire app. You get an initial server-side render, which is HTML that gives you SEO and everything else, but there's a little bit of wait time because the rest of the app has to spin up after that. So maybe can you touch on a little bit like Qwik's relation to React server components and how maybe some of the innovations there that might relate?
Yeah, why don't you share my screen again? I'm going to show it over here. So this is the app we built, right? And if you were to do it in Next.js, right, this portion right here could not be a server component because that has interactivity, et cetera. And so that portion would have to be a client-side component. And so what React server components basically do is they allow you to mark certain components as server-side. So one of the things, obviously, you could mark as server-side would be the header and the footer, or maybe some other data that you're fetching and will not be interactive in the client. And so React server components essentially allow you to explicitly opt in and say these components are server and these are client. And they have a way of putting the whole thing together for you. Now, there are constraints in there. So for example, server component can refer to a client component, but client component cannot refer to a server component. Server component is not allowed to have things like use methods, like use state. Whereas a client component, it also cannot have listeners, right? So like you cannot put a click listener on the server component and so on. And so there's basically like two different kinds of components that are in the separate files that you kind of work together and can build together an application that has the reactivity, the client-side reactivity in one set of components and the static content in the other side of component. I say static as in server time rendered static. It could be dynamic in the sense that server components can fetch data from the server and can inline the data into it. So how does it compare to Qwik? So Qwik is kind of similar in the sense that it's the same goal, but the way we go about it is very, very different, right? When I wanted to make this thing to be static or not renderable, I didn't have to do anything specific. I didn't have to mark it that it's not a lot, it's static or something like that. The way I got static behavior out of the system is purely because it's a reactive graph, and the system was able to look at the reactive graph and say like, hey, there is no code path that could possibly modify this code, and therefore I know it's static. And the other benefit you get is that in Qwik, there are no rules about this is a server component, this is a client component, therefore you're not allowed to have state or anything of that sort. So it becomes a much simpler, in my opinion, developer experience where you just build your components the way you would normally build your components without really thinking about how to do this. And the right thing just naturally happens because Qwik has sufficient insight into your application to kind of say like, oh, this component is never going to re-render. I'm just never going to bother sending the code to the client. Whereas this one does. And it knows how to do tricks as in, server and client can be mixed. You can set up listeners or use state or use signals in our case on the component. The component can still act as a server component, and so it's a much more kind of a natural experience for the developer. There are fewer constraints. You can just build your app, and if the component can be server-side rendered and never download the code, then it automatically just does that.
Definitely, yeah, and I've messed around a little bit with the Next.js 13 beta with the server components and everything, and that was my experience. Like basically, it's like server by default, and then you have to choose which are the client. But Qwik apparently gives you the DX of you don't even have to tell it what it is, and it just knows. It knows where it should run, which is pretty cool. Awesome. Cytronic has a question. So they said, I saw in the terminal you're using Vite. What's your opinion about it? Will it stick and stay in tech, or will it be a trend that will go away in a few months?
We love it. I don't think it's the trend that's going to go away. I mean, it's a fundamental building blocks for many different frameworks, right? Qwik uses it, Vue uses it, Svelte uses it, I think Solid uses it. So I don't see this stuff as going away. It's pretty pervasive at this point. It solves an important problem. And that solves it, I think, well, and it solves it in an agnostic way. And so because there is a need and it solves it, I think it's staying here. So we're big fans of Vite.
I would agree with that. At least, especially seeing what we came from, like most things we're using like Webpack, and then Parcel came around. I think Parcel has definitely been keeping up in terms of like keeping things zero config and fast and stuff like that. But yeah, I also agree that Vite is here to stay. So if you asked a question, type !mark here. Those will bubble up and we'll get to answer it.
If you have no questions, I can show you like a quick demo of what I mean by server versus client components.
Let's do it. Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, so let's see, let me hide this terminal. So let me just go back here, and I'm gonna just simplify my example here. We're gonna delete this, and let's just delete everything, and return. Okay, so here's our hello world, right? So fundamentally, this is a server rendered component that has no interactivity, right? Like nothing I can do here in the UI can possibly cause me to download some code associated with it, right? So essentially, my component is a React server, is equivalent to React server components, right? But of course, you could have data. So you could say, let's count new signal. Just start here and let's say count value. Okay, so we rendered 1, 2, 3 over here, right? Now here's where it kind of gets interesting. So now that you have state, you would think like, well, we have to serialize this state, right? So let's see, where do we go? We go right here. Notice what happens. The system said like, yeah, you created the state, you created a reactivity, but there's no way for that state to change. There's nothing you can do to influence this number. And so I am not even going to bother storing this state over here. So let's do the next thing. And let's say we have a button here now. And say click. And now say on click. Do console.log. Okay, so now we have a button here, right? And of course, if I click, the button prints hello, right? So I can click and you can see hello is getting printed. But again, if I look at, let's see, I'll make this bigger. If I look at the JSON that got serialized, it still didn't serialize the state because it said like, yeah, you have a button, you can click on it, but that button doesn't influence your component. And as a result, why get the state in there? So the next thing I can say is, how about I just print out the current value of count. So count.value. Now, the moment I print the value of count, this is the point where the system's like, all right, now I have to serialize you, right? Now I don't have a choice. And so we can go and maybe instead of count, I can do plus plus. And now, you know, this actually increments and now the system had to serialize this particular thing, right? So the thing that decided whether or not this component was serializable or not, or whether it was a server component, a client component, was whether or not you were able to modify state of the system, right? So if I delete this, now it has become a static component that did not serialize any state. And by just referring to a state, now the serialization now includes the state associated with it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a perfect example. Like when does it need to do, or when does it need to send down the code required to do the thing? I think which is related to a question that just came in from Stotney, who says, with all the tracking of the state, is there a compiler involved? How much compilation is involved in getting Qwik to the browser?
Yes, excellent question. So there is a compiler. Well, it's not really a compiler. What we call it is an optimizer. And so every time you see this $sign over here, so in this case, we see 2 of them. What you're actually telling the optimizer is to go break this code up so that it can be loaded separately. So if you notice this click button, so if I, let's go to network tab. If I click this button, then it downloaded just the function, right? Console log hello value right here, right? It basically needed to extract this piece of code, right? So this piece of code essentially got cut and somewhere in some separate file, it created export foo equals, something like this, and then left behind information about like, oh, go to some file, abc.js, and then download foo, and then do the required bits. So that's called the optimizer, and optimizer basically allows us to take a single large application and then break it up into pieces, and based on that, we can do other operations. So this is basically what allows us to say, like, even though there's this inner closure that has no reference, we can download just that bit. Oops, sorry, I have to click on it. We can download just that bit. Then, of course, we download the framework itself, and then it's this development thing that doesn't really count. And we can update it. And so the interesting bit is that what we didn't download is actually the JSX in here, or any of the parent components, or any other bits of kind of code that are associated here.
Definitely. And I guess, so I'm just seeing this now, is like the regular onClick available to you? And like if you used onClick versus onClick $, would the code behave differently? And is it possible to do that?
No, well, no, not really.
Okay.
So you can see that like it complains to you saying like, hey, there's no such property as onClick. So you have to do a onClick $.
Okay.
And so it's the type system basically forces you. Same thing with the component here. Like I can't do this, because the system's like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? The thing that you want is a component $. Here. And so it's kind of built into the system. And the way you think about it is that the more $signs, every single $sign basically becomes a potential entry point into the system for the client, right? If you want to be resumable, that means that you might want to resume from clicking the buy button, or from clicking on your shopping cart, or from commenting on a review of the product. Those are all different ways that a system can resume continuing execution. And what that means is that all of these different ways of resuming need an entry point, right? As long as this closure here is buried deeply in JSX, it is not possible to resume from that location, because there's no way for the system to get a hold of it.
Right.
So Optimizer's job is to turn this code into something that actually can be referred to.
Right. And so this kind of gets to a question I saw earlier. Let me see if I can find it, which is basically like, why does Qwik have its own API? Like, why aren't we just using useState or useEffect? And I think it comes down to, like you're saying, they're basically optimization markers. So like the optimizer knows that when to pick those out. Let me see if I can find the person that asked that.
Yeah, it's not just the optimization markers. It's that we need to be able to serialize the state, right? So everything you do needs to be serializable. So let's say you create a stream, and while doing the stream, you expect the system to serialize itself and send it to the client. Like that's just not a thing. Like nobody can serialize a stream, right? You need to be able to store the state of it. And so there are two parts. One is that these values themselves have to be serializable right here, right? But also the notion of reactivity graph, that has to be serializable internally as well. So actually, let's maybe look into this, how this works a little deeper. If you look at the click button, you see there's an attribute here that says on:click. And this attribute contains a URL to where the code is for running it. What is the exported symbol name, which you can see over here, test component on:click, right? And so then there's this 0 over here on the end. And so if you go to the JSON, this 0 refers to these objects. So this 0 refers to the first item in the object. So this guy right here, this is a special code that tells us like, oh, actually, this is a signal that then refers to 1. So this last digit here is actually pointing to 1. So that's the signal that wraps 1. And this signal has a subscription. So basically, we're saying that if the signal number 2 changes, so that's this, I think it's 2 points. No, that wouldn't be the number 2. I forget how this is coded, but this basically says if this signal changes right here, then you need to find object number 7. So that would be, if I go here, that would be right here. See this T7, this thing right here. So then, and you have to update the data property with the value property. So if we go here, and if we find this object right here, and if we say %0 data equals ABC, right? We can change the binding. in the UI, right? So that's kind of how it works. But notice what it allows us to do, because this is fully described, this object, this graph fully describes all the relationships. This particular component is fully interactive without the component actually downloading, right? Which is kind of what I showed you earlier when I did console.log, right? This render executes on a server, right? No surprise there, but let's see. It will not execute on the client. Right? The client prints hello 1 2 3 4, right? But it does not print the render. That code just never got downloaded.
Right. Is the serialized JSON there? Is that any kind of specification that you're coming up with, or anything that could potentially be used by other frameworks for serializing?
No, it's an implementation detail. You don't have to kind of worry about what it is, and it's unlikely that you will ever want to interoperate with other systems using this particular JSON. So there's really not much value in standardizing it. The JSON is interesting because it can serialize a lot of complicated things. First of all, it can do graphs, cyclical graphs, which regular JSON cannot. It can serialize signals and things. It can serialize references to other closures. It can serialize promises, as crazy as it sounds, and other things like dates and maps and sets, etc. So all the basics objects that you would normally work with in your application are actually serializable within Qwik.
Awesome. All right, let's try to get to a few more questions. And by the way, that question was from I like you 99 about like why aren't we using React's API? I mean, I think there were some similar comments in the Twitch chat. For, well, if Qwik understands onClick $, then why can't it just understand onClick? I guess, do you have an answer for that? And I think
so that's a good one. So actually, let me delve into it deeper.
Sure.
We could make it understand onClick. We could. The problem is that the $ has a meaning to not just for the optimizer, but also for the developer. Special rules apply when you see it here, right? And so if we just had onClick, then the developer would have to know like, oh, that's a special property. Special rules apply here.
Sure.
By putting a $, we're basically telling the developer like, you know those special rules that go with $? This is one of those places, right? Yeah. And we can go into details of what they are, but I think it's kind of like the use methods, right? Like when you see a use method, you understand special rules apply. Certain things are not allowed in this particular location, like, for example, if statements, for loops, and other things, right?
Right.
And you just understand this intuitively. And so after a while, you're like, oh, use method, I know what the rules are. And so you have to understand that this is a $, and therefore there are special rules that apply over here. Now, the other thing people pointed about, why not just use React? And so let me actually dive into this a little bit. And the short answer is React is coarse grain reactive, meaning that when something changes, React goes to the top of the tree where the common state of is stored, and it causes a re-rendering of all the children, right? And if you have a coarse grain reactive system, what that means is that even if you could somehow solve the hydration problem, like even if you can somehow skip over the hydration, like I don't know how that would be done, but like pretend that that's the solved problem, right? Even if you did that, the first time you would interact with the application, the whole application would download and execute, right? And so all this hard fight of like delaying code would just be undone by the simple fact that if you're coarse-grained reactive, you have to start at the root component and kind of re-render all the pieces. And I know it doesn't have to really be root, it could be a little lower, but like you'll get huge areas of application that will kind of do this. And so Qwik needs to be fine-grained reactive, right? And the reason we want to be fine-grained reactive is because we want to be really surgical about the updates. Not because it's faster. It is faster, but that's not the real reason, right? The real reason is because if we can be surgical, then that allows you to not have to download all of the intermediate components that are in the tree. Right? If you have a state that's somewhere high up on a tree, and then this branch somewhere deep over here, you have the click button, and then this branch over here has like the shopping cart. If you click on the shopping cart, we don't have to go up and down and then cause all of the re-renderings to happen. We just go directly to the shopping cart, be like, you need to render it, re-render yourself. And that means that all of the components that are above you and next to you and siblings and all that stuff, none of those components need to execute. And because they don't execute, none of them have to download. And so the real reason for all of these things is that the name of the game is delay execution for as long as possible. And if you delay it long enough, you're going to discover that many components just never ever re-render on the client. And if they never ever render on a client, that's code that you don't have to ship. That is a code that you don't have to execute, and less data for the client and all the benefits that go with it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And I think the other thing is like for someone who does like let's say write React on a daily basis, like what they're thinking about is, well, I don't want to change the way I do things, but I think kind of the argument you're making is like it's worth it, right? So like if you can
Yes.
start to understand like the ideas in Qwik and like what the $ actually means, that it's worth it adopting and learning because you get all of the benefit from it. So while we would like to just do what we've always done and not change, changing is for the better, I think.
I think it's a good way of putting it, yes.
David, I think he was talking about the bug that you had earlier, who was saying, he's saying, could the data be the thing breaking the code? I don't think it is, because you added that later on, right? You wrapped the
Actually, I have it in here.
okay.
So the same exact thing was happening here.
Yeah, so I think at one point, you on the use my data, you returned an object with a data property instead. But now that it, like, this example code doesn't have that, then you don't need the data.
Yeah. I am, as soon as we're done, I'm gonna deep dive into this thing, because this should be working.
Okay.
There's no reason, and I've had it working many times before. And the fact that it's also broken inside of StackBlitz, which is few versions behind. Is really concerning. So like there is some obvious thing that I'm missing here.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, but thanks for the suggestion, David. This is a good one, which I haven't thought about, and I'm curious how it plays in. So David asks, how well does Qwik handle client-side only libraries? So like, let's say I wanted to add like a leaflet map to my page, like because it's not a Qwik library, how can we tell Qwik that this is client only?
It just automatically happens, right? Because if it's a, you presumably a client-only library, you will execute from what am I trying to say? From the browser, right? You won't execute it from the server. And so as long as you only executed it from the browser, it will naturally just the bundling system will get pulled in with it automatically. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm not answering the question, but hopefully.
No, I think you are. But basically, it just works. So like, if I import leaflet, it knows that it shouldn't import it on the server on the client. Iminox, I think, has a fix. He says that you should be tracking filter in the use task. So like the use my data, how does it know that it needs filter, or like filter needs to be tracked in the use my data?
No, that just gives you the data, and then you should be able to filter it.
Okay, maybe they're thinking in React. Maybe they don't realize we're in Qwik right now.
Yeah,
because I think that's the other thing is there's no dependency arrays here. Like the dependency tracking is automatic.
That's a lot of ways automatic. You don't have to think about that. The dependency arrays, yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show you something random here.
Let's do it.
I am. This is horrible. Don't judge me on my horrible CSS, okay? Because I cannot do CSS to save my life. But this is actually one thing we're working on our homepage. And so there's a piece of code, I know, white background, horrible things. And the thing we want to do is we want to show you, like, if you hover over it, we'll have a little explanation of what's going on. But I think what's even more important is that we want to, as you scroll the page, we want the page to kind of separate itself out and kind of show you that in a single file, you actually have 3 separate layers. You have the code that always runs on a server. You have the code that is isomorphic, that runs sometimes on a server and sometimes on a client. And then you have code that always runs in the client and never on a server. And you can kind of get all of that information just by knowing how to look at the $signs, right? So if I go here and I know what the semantic meaning of this thing is, then I know this code always runs on a server. If I know what the semantic meaning of the component is, then I know this is isomorphic code. It can run here or there. And if I know what input is, then I know this always runs on the client. And so I think it's just you kind of talk about it, but I think when you kind of show people how these are actually layers of code that get put together into a single file, and the optimizer can separate the pieces out and then allow you to run them, I think it clicks in people's minds.
Yeah, this visualization was so cool. I mean, the moment you scrolled to 100, it was like split it apart. That's awesome. I think that's a great way to show people where things are happening.
Yeah. And so, what's happening in other frameworks is that it's either the code is isomorphic, meaning that it runs everywhere, or like in the case of React Server Components, you're basically saying this whole file is server only, right? Or this whole file is client only, but you don't have this automatic meshing, which allows you to be really fine-grained about it. Like in React Server Components, you can only choose per component. And when you make a choice on a particular component, you're also implying a choice about whether or not you can have listeners and whether or not you can have state and interactions and other bits. Whereas here, just by the way you use the API, the choice is made automatically for you. And the default is we're trying to push as much of it to the server as possible. But if we have no choice, then we'll obviously do it on the client.
Definitely. All right, let's try to get to a few more questions. Yeah, so Avi has a question. I mean, a lot of these questions are like, I just want to do it the old way, or I want to do something else. So Avi says, do I have to use JSX with Qwik? Can I use Svelte-like or Vue-like syntax?
As of right now, it's JSX. I mean, in theory, we could do other.
All right, Pablo says, do you often mention that the compiler does some heuristic to preload the code that is more likely to be executed? Is this something generic, or is this something that changes based on the real use of my application?
Okay, yeah, so it's super cool. There's so many new concepts in Qwik, and somehow it's even difficult to kind of talk about them all. Yeah, so let's talk about the prefetching system. So if you're in a world where you don't execute code until you actually need it, so like in our example, like we were in the world where, if we're not clicking the button here, so do I have a... Oh, that's all broken now. Sorry, I kind of messed with it. So if you have a world where when you click on the button, then you download the code, that's actually a problem, right? Because especially on a slow mobile network, you would see a delay when you click that. And so what you want is a way to execute the code, to fetch the code eagerly. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. So first of all, during compile time, what symbols goes into which chunk is a configuration information. Actually, let me back up a second. So imagine two extremes. One extreme is you put all of your code into a single bundle. That's one extreme. The other extreme is you put every single function in a separate bundle. And obviously, neither of these extremes is a good idea, right? Like one has way too much to download, the other one, is too fine-grained, the one is too coarse. But existing systems don't really allow us to have easy way of going somewhere in between. We have to do it manually by changing the source code by putting dynamic imports. The cool thing in Qwik is that that's actually a dial that you can tell the compiler, and you can basically tell the compiler, how many bundles do you want? Do you want one, or do you want many, or anywhere in between? You can also tell the compiler oh, I've noticed that when you interact with this button, it's very likely that the user is going to do this other thing. So why don't you take these two things and put it in the same bundle? And so what Qwik allows you to do is to collect kind of statistical information about how people actually use your application. And then you take the statistical information and then you feed it back into the bundling step, and you say, you know what, based on how people are actually using it, could you produce bundles that are, have the correct stuff in there, so that when you navigate to a page, you might not have any interaction yet, therefore no JavaScript is loaded, but there is a service worker in the background, and a service worker starts pre-populating the cache. The service worker makes sure that when you do click on a button, the code is waiting in the cache, and you don't have to make a round trip to the server. And then so the service worker then uses the information about what is the most likely thing you can click on, or what is the common thing that you're going to do, and based on that, it changes the order in which items get fetched and put into the cache. So by the time you as a developer, you as a end user want to interact with the application and you click on something, you know that the cache is pre-populated and you're not going to wait for the round trip to the server. So the service worker actually has two advantages. First of all, the amount of code it has to download is less, because Qwik was able to determine that many of these components are server-only components and they never get executed in the client. And so the actual corpus of all the possible JavaScript to download is smaller, right? So that's the first advantage. And the second advantage, the service worker knows statistically what are you more likely to click on, and so it can order the download in the correct order so that the more likely behavior comes before. And the other thing I want to point out is that if you have a normal framework, there is this uncanny valley where the server-side render content shows up and you click on something and nothing happens because the hydration hasn't finished, right? There's this period of time where it looks like you can interact, but you can't. And you don't actually know when things become interactive. There's no visual thing for the user to show them that, oh, at this point it's interactive, right? And so when you click too early, it's possible that this click just goes into ether and it just gets lost forever. This cannot happen in Qwik applications. The moment I show you a button, that button is clickable. It is possible that if you're unbelievably fast and you click on the button immediately, it's possible that the serverless worker hasn't had a chance to download the code, and so you might have to wait ever so slightly for the code to download, but the button click itself will never, ever be lost. Whereas in normal systems, right, if the code is not ready, as the hydration hasn't happened, it just goes into ether, it's just lost. So in, if you are just like, if you, it's the first time you navigate to a page, and the moment the button shows up, you click, you might have to wait for the JavaScript to show up. That time will be certainly slow, way faster, in other words, less time than equivalent of hydration. If you would take a moment to hesitate, that download would have happened anyways, because statistically we know what's happening. And so if you take any second as a user to hesitate before you click on something, the code will already be loaded, and so the first interaction will be fast. I'm not sure I'm kind of doing it all justice, but the point is, if you imagine a system which like speculatively does all these bits, it is what you get out of the box for Qwik. Like, you don't, as a developer, you don't have to build the system. It just comes with Qwik. It's just how Qwik works.
Yeah, I think that's great to hear. I don't know if I missed it, but does the tool exist already that would give you the metrics of which parts of your apps could be optimized in terms of, like, this JavaScript should be included in initial page load because this part of the app is used more? Does that already exist, or is that something that's coming?
That's something that's coming. So what exists today is that it is easy for you yourself to collect this information, but then you have to do kind of collection and storing in some database and doing all those bits.
Right.
What's coming is like this service where you can provision a database and just point it automatically so that as you use it, we will automatically collect the data, right? The hard part isn't collecting this data. The hard part is you have to store it somewhere, right?
Sure.
And so either you write your own code for storing, or we will kind of give it to you. But that part is not yet done. So we don't have this out-of-the-box database, here you go and use it. But you can certainly collect all this information right now, because every time you interact with something, Qwik fires a custom DOM event. And so all you need to do is listen for these custom DOM events, and then you therefore know in which order the code executes.
Sure.
And then you just have to take this code, this information about the order, and give it to the bundler. And then the bundler will already do the right stuff. So awesome. All those pieces are there. What's missing is this, one button provision a database so that you don't have to do it yourself.
For sure. So I have some good news, maybe. So Iminox sent a code sample of the code fixed that we were talking about earlier, but they had to use task and track to actually get like this filter working. I think they mentioned that you shouldn't have to do this, but
yeah, you shouldn't have to do this.
Yeah, but with use task and track, that is one way to get get this example working.
Yeah, so use computed is probably a better way of doing it than use task, but you shouldn't have to do this. So there's something off over there, and I need to figure out what it is.
Okay.
And I am so sorry
that's okay.
that it is not working. That's why it's still not a version 1.0. We're very close to 1.0, but not one. Like, I've done this demo so many times, I'm not sure why it's not working today.
Okay, no worries. All right, so I think we're gonna ask just a few more questions. We're gonna start winding down. So if you asked a question, type !mark here, and the questions will bubble up. And then also, if you see a question, so if you go to vox.coding.garden, I would say go ahead and just upvote an existing question instead of asking one, so we can try to get the more popular questions answered. So Parasocial Fix asked the question, how different is this compiler compared to the TanStack Bling compiler? I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so Ryan Carniato from SolidJS and Tanner Lindsay with TanStack, they kind of got together and like, oh, this $sign is a great idea. We want to use it too. And so they started building something similar called Blink. Since then, we actually chatted with each other and said, hey, we already have this amazing thing called the optimizer. It's in Rust. It's unbelievably fast. It does all these great things. Why don't you just use the same exact thing? So we're actually in the talks with them to reuse the same optimizer we have for it. The idea of the of these of the dollar sign is actually, I just put it in a blog post just recently. I made a blog post called WTF code extraction, where I kind of go through this. I think if you just Google WTF code extraction, it should come up. It's on Builder.io. And I kind of dive deep into it and explain all these parts. Builder.io?
There it is.
Yeah, that's it. So this is a good kind of a explanation of what's going on, why does it go on, why does it work, and so on. So I kind of explained it in like 3 levels. The simplest level is like get static props, which I call the export extraction. You're relying on the fact that the tree shaker kind of takes it out. The next level up is server $, or rather this $sign syntax, which allows you to extract functions. And then the higher way up is what I call closure extraction, where in Qwik, the function itself can actually be a closure. And closure closes over variables, right? So it's easy to extract a function because it doesn't close over anything, so you can just move it. But in reality, oftentimes functions close over things. And so Qwik can actually do closure extraction. So that's kind of the highest level of it. And this basically allows us to do an interesting kind of a transformation of the source code, but leave the meaning of the transformation to the developer. So for example, let's say you want to implement something like lazy $. That has a different semantic meaning than server $, or worker $, which means just take this function and execute it on a server or in the web worker, right? Yeah. And so the idea here is that the optimizer provides a low-level primitive by which it can break the code into pieces. And then the developer can assign meaning to this, right? So the developer can say, I really wish I had this lazy $, and then they go ahead and can implement that. Sure. Or the server $, or worker, etc., or many other choices. Like for example, analytics $. Like I want to run some analytics code on the server to keep track of things, but I don't want to be bothered right now in the UI. So it could be great if you could do that.
Very cool.
And so I kind of showed you this original thing where I had the code and like separated into layers.
Yeah.
What the $sign basically allows you to do is to jump between the layers. Right. So using the $sign is where you kind of go like, oh, I'll pause the execution here and now execute it somewhere else. And so it's this kind of a teleportation device which you can go between these layers. And you can have as many, I mean, we can't have 3 layers right now, but you could have another layer for web worker, maybe another layer for, a separate server that's not the server you're talking to, but maybe like, compute server or something like that. I don't know, like your imagination is kind of where you can take it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm also thinking of is like maybe extracting things out into like serverless functions or something like that. Like if you had your own $sign that basically say, okay, well, this should actually be an edge function or a serverless function.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah.
That's the kind of idea. Yes.
Cool.
So again, the $sign only does the low-level primitive of breaking the code up. You as a developer give it meaning. And that's kind of the nice thing is that it's really powerful because you can give it lots of different kinds of meanings.
Definitely. Bob just has the question. Can you send me the link to the working code once you figure out that demo bug? Because I
will send you a link once I figure this out.
He wants closure. He wants to know that it's working. Cool.
Me too.
Cool. 0501 had the question. Are you looking for people to work with or hiring? So is Builder.io hiring anyone?
Not as of right now. I know the economy is kind of in a very interesting, precarious state. We're doing well. We still have almost 2 years of runway, so we think we can last through this economic recession and come out on the other side unscathed, and then raise Series B when we're ready. We have about 50 people working on it. Not on the Qwik. We have 50 total in the company.
Right.
There's about 3 people that we have working dedicated to the open source work that we do. We do a lot of stuff with blog posts and social media to kind of educate and kind of create awareness around this problem. But as of right now, we're not doing any hiring.
Okay. Wait, his question was different than that? I guess I wasn't clear on what he was asking. All right, Miško, if you could look real quick at vox.coding.garden, just do a quick scroll. Is there any other question that you'd like to answer on there?
So the one person's asking, how does fetching JavaScript in the background work if latency is bad? I think I kind of touched on it, and again, I'm just going to reiterate this because this is a very common question and people get this wrong. People like constantly email me and say like, oh, but now when I click on the button, I'm going to have to wait for the code to download and now it's going to be slow. And like, you just made the application miserably difficult to work with.
Yeah.
First of all, I am amused that people would think that we wouldn't think the most obvious problem.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't solve it. So the solution we have is basically we have a service worker that runs in the background and is responsible for prefetching all the JavaScript as soon as possible, right? So worst case scenario is that the service worker has to prefetch the whole application just like you would prefetch a whole application in existing systems, right? So that's the worst case scenario. The service worker will start fetching the code immediately as if you're fetching. So in the worst case scenario, the service worker will get all the code in the same time as your existing application, right? But already Qwik has an advantage because Qwik doesn't have to execute that code. Service worker fetched it, but we don't have to execute it. So right there, even in worst case scenario, we are already way ahead because we didn't have to run hydration, right? We still downloaded the code, we didn't have to hydration, right? But in the typical scenario, the amount of code that the service worker has to download is a tiny fraction of the overall application, right? So now we're having multiple advantages. First of all, we don't execute it, so right there, we're winning. The next bit is we don't download all of the code. Instead, we downloaded only a fraction of it. And then even the fraction we download, we can prioritize it based on how likely it is that you're going to actually need it, right? And so if you add up all these advantages together, it's actually a significant improvement. So yes, a good question, common question. It is taken care of. When you are in production, the bundles that are sent through are downloaded eagerly, but they're not executed eagerly. And so this is kind of taken care of.
Definitely.
Let's see.
Yeah, and I guess I would say to try, like I would say, try it yourself. go to qwik.builder.io, bring down an app, but open the network tab and you can just choose like 2G or 3G, see how the app behaves with a slow network. So.
Okay, but I want to say a couple of caveats in that.
Sure,
First
sure,
of all, what people oftentimes do is they do it in dev mode. In dev mode, there is no service worker. Okay, so don't do it on dev mode, do it in production mode.
Okay.
The second thing they do is they go into the network tab and what they want to simulate is the first time visit. And so they click disable cache. But remember, the way this works is the service worker pre-populates the cache. And so if you disable the cache, you have just disabled the service worker. So the correct way to do it is to leave the cache enabled, but clear the cache. Right. And so you have to go to the correct tab in the application that you want to clear the service worker cache, not just the general cache of the browser. And if you clear that cache, then you are simulating the first time visit that you have never been before, and then you can see how this stuff works.
Okay.
So it's kind of the developers have to kind of change the way they're thinking about this particular problem because they're used to doing certain things, but you have to do it slightly differently. I'm still going through the questions.
It's good to know. Yeah, no worries. And I guess I'll just take this opportunity to call out JSNation real quick. So this interview is brought to you by JSNation. If you go to jsnation.com, it's the main JavaScript conference in 2023. So this is going to be happening on June 1st in Amsterdam. Miško will be there. He's giving a talk titled Building a Web App, the Easy Path and the Performant Path. Why are they not the same? Which is what we've been getting into today. There's going to be plenty of other speakers at JSNation, and I'll be there also. So I'll be emceeing. So I'd love to see you there. And also, if you can't make it to Amsterdam, it'll be offered as a remote conference as well. So you'll still have an opportunity to watch the talks and participate, even if you can't make it there.
I see one person is asking where they can get help. I'm going to point them to Discord. Discord is definitely a place to go. And I think somebody also asked, like, what is the kind of the main thing about Qwik? And I don't know. What I'm trying to get through is this resumability, right? Is the main thing. Lack of hydration, but it is kind of hard to talk about because there is no equivalent in other frameworks, right? So if you have framework A and framework B, and framework A says we're better at X, as long as the other framework has X, it's easy to have a discussion because like, oh, it's like that, but better, right? Whereas here we're like, we have this completely other thing you never heard of. We have service worker that do prefetching. We have this silver $ that breaks your code base into pieces. We have these source codes that contain server client and isomorphic code, and like it all gets broken down. Like it's new vocabulary that you have to learn. right? But the benefit is that once you understand this vocabulary, then your users will love you because your apps are going to be very, very fast.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, and I'll just mention if you go to the Qwik website, there's a link to the Discord that you can click on if you want to join it. And I guess does the community tab have? Yeah, community tab has more info on how to get help on Qwik as well.
Likewise, yes.
Awesome. Were there any other questions you wanted to answer?
I think that's it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. This has been great.
Well, thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty, everyone. Again, this is brought to you by JSNation. Definitely check out jsnation.com. If you want to reach out to Miško or anything, he's on Twitter at Hevery. Definitely take a look at Qwik, qwik.builder.io. Give it a try. I'm definitely going to be giving it a try on stream pretty soon. So definitely check it out. And that's it for today. So Miško, if you'll stay on for
Yes.
maybe the next 5 minutes, I'll talk to you after the stream is over,
Yes,
and I'll
yes.
let you know when the stream is over.
Okay.
Alrighty, everyone. Again, thank you for all your questions. Thank you for hanging out today. It's been awesome. So wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. And until next time, here's this. Just a quick shout out to all of the people that supported today. Sorry, I didn't have notifications on, but thank you, Electrothermal, for that resub. Thank you, Nika, for the 10 months. And again, thank you, B. Holmes, for that raid.